What is going on, everyone? Hope everyone listening is having a good day, no matter where you're tuning in from. And welcome back to another episode of Buzz Beat. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not sure I would ever say those words or hear those words ever again. So it feels good. But yes, this is Brian Geisinger. Today I will be joined on the pod by Darian and of course, Professor Emeritus Spencer Percy will also, Dr. Percy will be on with me today. Richie Randall, it will be in the background producing on the ones and twos. We greatly appreciate him staying on to help with this episode. We'll see how many of these we'll be able to muster this season. But there's been some preseason basketball. There's been some fun, positive things I think to take out of the Hornets so far this season, and yeah, we had to just hop on the mics here. But before we get to any of that, Darian, Spencer, how are you guys doing?
Oh, well, I'm doing good. Excited that basketball is back, excited that everyone's excited. No matter how I feel the season's going to go, it's always excited to see everyone excited at this point in time before the rigorousness of the NBA starts to settle in. So excited that everybody's excited that our team looks good.
Yeah, well, I mean, after Professor Emeritus or whatever that was that Brian called me, it feels like I should reevaluate my estate planning or something at this point.
No, today's a syllabus day. All right, so you're just gonna
makes me feel a little older than I am. I do feel old, but geez. No, but I'm good. It's great to be with you boys. It's always good when the NBA season is coming back, and yeah, 2 preseason games through, as Darian touched on. Yeah, a lot of positive, I think, to touch on.
Yeah, so far, I think the vibes have been pretty good. Really, honestly, kind of going back to the middle of last season. It really does feel like late January. I can't remember if it was the Rozier or the PJ Washington trade. Like which of those two things came first? I don't remember the exact order. Obviously, the Hayward deal was in there as well. But man, it's been the direction the team has been heading in has been fun, and it has been really interesting to get to see, albeit just 2 preseason games, more of a sample size with Charles Lee at the helm. And look, I know vibes are good in training camp, and everyone's in the best shape of their life. Everyone either gained weight or lost weight. I gained weight probably, but even with that aside, like it has been really enjoyable to see the Hornets get going here. They opened up preseason pretty early. I mean, October 6th preseason game with a loss at home to the New York Knicks. That was with the Karl Anthony Towns a debut, I guess, in air quotes, and only a few days removed from New York and Charlotte also being involved in the transaction along with Minnesota, the 3-team deal that sent Dante DiVincenzo and Julius Randle to Minnesota and Karl Anthony Towns to New York, and a collection of draft picks, second-round picks to the Hornets. Who, Spencer, I think you and I were joking about this, but I'm pretty sure the Hornets have been involved as the 3rd team in more trade transactions this summer than the previous 10 years combined. So it's been fun. I gotta say, it's been nice to see them show that they're open for business. I believe those were the words you used on Twitter too, and I think was a really good way to put it. So
no hanging fruit, just reach up and grab it. Yeah, I just think that was more or less just kind of a let's get creative with the other people that are trying to get creative in the league. And, all 3 I guess outside of Minnesota, I mean, all 3 front offices, I mean, I would consider them to be fairly young leadership, or at least young in context to tenure in their job. So I just think it's something important for Hornets fans to kind of bookmark as a good sign moving forward.
Yeah, I did. I sort of thought the 2026 second round pick that they got from Golden State, I thought that could be kind of interesting. Like if Golden State bottoms out or continues to be sort of middling, I mean, maybe that ends up as a top 40, top 45 pick or something like that. And given the fact that the Hornets may be out their own 2026 second round pick, depending on how this one set of transactions conveys with San Antonio, them being able to have a draft pick or a chip or whatever in that second round potentially feels like a small, a tiny team building win. But yeah,
Last thing I would say, BG, just real
Yeah.
quickly before we move on, I just think it's like, again, I guess it goes back to the original thing I said on Twitter, but it's like, call us, right? Like it's just like it's an entryway to, this is an open line. If there's a possibility or an opportunity that you come across and you need help, or if you like one of, like, this is an open line. So I really liked it. I know it's just basically an offsetting of salaries with the cash that New York sent, and then like you just mentioned the Golden State pick, but I guess the most interesting part is, and we don't need to talk about it, but James Nagy Hornets just kind of giving up on him. But it's new management, and maybe I don't think he was very good overseas from what I've heard and watched any, this past season. But that was the only surprising part to me, is them just kind of shipping him off as a piece. But they had to send something, right?
Yeah. And from all look, Najee played really well at Summer League last season, I thought, for Charlotte. But as I think was, pretty well established as sort of like reports, from overseas media or whatever it could be, or his agent, it didn't seem like James Najee, wanted to be in Charlotte either.
Yeah.
So to be able to move a guy like that, who I think could be a rotation center in the NBA at one point in time, but who didn't want to be in Charlotte, and to be able to, and again, you've got other guys in the pipeline ahead of him at the center position, so it not too big of a cost to be a facilitator in this transaction. But yeah, so again, we're 2 games in to the Charles Lee tenure. I'm not going to count Summer League quite yet. I'm not going to even including the one game in Vegas that Charles Lee coached, or that may have been he may have actually coached a game in Sacramento. I can't remember now, but
I want to say it was like one of each. He did one of each and then coaching,
okay, all right. But with that, guys, I would like to turn it over to you and Darian. I'll start with you. Thoughts on just sort of like what we've seen so far through 96 minutes of Charles Lee with the Charlotte Hornets.
One thing I've noticed right away is just his ability or willingness to coach right then and there on the floor. Like, I think there was a play where they called a foul, or maybe it was a turnover on LaMelo, and LaMelo was arguing with the ref, and you could see in the way the camera was framed, it was Charles Lee just going like this, like telling LaMelo, let's just go. And while that's something small, it is preseason. I think and it's something they've been preaching this whole time. It just builds a good habit to, like, there's sometimes there's just no point of arguing with the ref. I think the Hornets were up at the time. It's not like it is preseason, so maybe we'll see him be a little lenient when it comes to stuff like that during the regular season. But it's not like that particular turnover was going to change the game. I think it was only in the second quarter, of course. So small things like that, and we've seen Clifford do it, but it's just, I think Charles Lee is just doing it not just for every single basketball mistake, like, oh, you didn't make the right read, or it's just even the smaller things in that. Now, it could be just him trying to find his basis, trying to get in his groove as far as coaching these guys up. But I did like to see that, because we know for this team, talent is an issue, has been an issue in the past, but there was also a lot of little things that we really it was like, these things are so simple, but yet we weren't catching on to them. So to have a coach that is visibly coaching them on that, because I believe Steve Clifford probably did too, but it was more so you heard about it, like, oh, he was very hard on them on this during practice. But to just see it live, I think it's cool, because it's consistent. It's and he's doing it with LaMelo, all the way down to Daquan Jeffries, to Dwayne Washington, to those guys. Dwayne Washington's not on the team anymore, but all the way down. He's doing it from the beginning of the game to the end of the game. And I think that, and I really like seeing that, because, like I said, for so long, it just seemed like the smallest things that make a basketball player, we just weren't grasping. And it feels as though we're getting that now. It's early, it's preseason, but it's just cool to see.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you kind of took it right away from me, Darren. Like, I would echo all that. I mean, obviously, any new coach on any level wants to have their voice be the loudest in the locker room, on the court, right away. And I think he's doing a fantastic job of that. But, what's different about, and I think Steve Clifford, we've got a lot of clips that we could replay to prove this, would also like to be the same way. He was very vocal with his players, but Charles he's younger, right? Like, he can probably relate to these guys a little bit better. And it certainly seems, I mean, it's very, very, very early, right? But it certainly seems like he has earned the respect, or at least gotten the attention of this locker room, right? And I think that's a super important thing, again, on any level of basketball as a head coach. I love his energy. I love his attention to detail. This could play out a lot of different ways, but this is a sharp guy, who I think is on top of his stuff. And I think, looking forward, I'm very confident in the fact that, again, regardless of how it plays out, I like this hire. I like this hire a lot. I mean, this guy just seems like he's on top of it. So, other things, defensively, I think his attention to detail has been the number one thing that I've probably noted from the Hornets. It's shown up less in these 2 preseason games, but they are preseason games. I mean, these guys are kind of still going through the motions, right? But I do think that the Hornets, not naturally, will be one of the most tenacious defensive teams in the league, but I think they will be coached up to be hopefully a league average defense. And if they could scratch out a league average defense with this group, 7-8 seed's not out of the question, because I do think there's some pop on the other end. And then obviously LaMelo. I mean, last night he looks awesome. He obviously looks healthy. He looks like he's almost floating out there. Just very light on his feet, very light in all his movements, everything he's doing. So, it's very positive. And I guess the last point I would make is, if Saloon can be an actual rotational player, which I'm still a little skeptical about once the regular season comes around, I gotta say, Charlotte's got some depth. Like, they actually have like 9 or 10 guys that can play, and that matters in the NBA, because you're going to have 1 or 2 injuries in the first month, 2 months, and you got to have depth in this league to make it through 82 games. So far so good, and I would say so far better than I expected in the preseason.
Yeah, I mean, they're dealing with injuries right now too, right? I mean, these are not just like back end of the rotation guys. I mean, they're missing a guy like Mark Williams, who's a starter, a guy like Grant Williams, who's probably a 6-man spot starter, Nick Smith Jr., Josh Green has missed, after playing, getting, I guess, suffering an undisclosed kind of awkward injury early on against Miami. He doesn't play the rest of the game after that. And they continue to just like, to hum and to like look good. It really is awing to see just like how much more talent and offensive skill is on the roster now compared to like middle of last season. The guard room, we've talked about this plenty of times, but just like one of the amazing things to me about the trade deadline in 2024 was like, even though they moved guys like Terry Rozier and Gordon Hayward, and they did so to get picks and future stuff, the like playmaking pop that they added with Vasa Micic, Seth Curry, obviously Trey Mann, who's played well in preseason so far too. It just like it jumped off the screen, I thought. And I think we've seen some of that in preseason as well. 30,000 foot view, I would just say like it feels like there's kind of a weight off the shoulders of this team with the ownership change. I like, again, I'm not with this team in the locker room every day. Maybe nothing's changed, but it just kind of feels like that. Like Spencer was describing LaMelo looking light and almost floating around on the court. Like I do feel, or my sense, at least from the outside looking in, is that the vibe is good and it's different there right now. And I think that has a lot to do with like, with just, not just a new coach or a new front office, but the new ownership. I just think from the top down, the vibe there feels pretty good. Offensively, what I'm seeing so far that I've liked, I've enjoyed some of the 3-guard sets that they've played, where it's been, Micic, Trey Mann, and Seth Curry, or it's been Mann, Curry, and LaMelo Ball. And by doing that, one, you've got a lot of different guys on the court that can operate pick and roll or get into guard screening actions, but also lets LaMelo get at least start the possession off the ball. And I think they've gotten into some good sort of like second side pick and roll actions with LaMelo. They've gotten him into some catch and go or catch and shoot situations. He had a nice, I think it was with Curry, It was either Curry or Mann in the Miami game where they had sort of like a little like your turn, my turn, give and go, like pump and go, kick back out to the next guy. Defense rotates over, kick it back out again. And LaMelo just sort of like bending the defense off the catch, then making the extra pass for an open three. Really good stuff. I've enjoyed seeing them push the ball after makes. This is something that felt like it was such a huge, I feel a little bit like we're talking, almost like college basketball style offenses, getting into those secondary break actions, but just this team early on, the first, 2 years of LaMelo, obviously they ran, especially after turnovers and stuff like that, but just their ability to run even after makes. And I just think you can see them like after both the New York and the Miami games, like after a make, they're going to get into double drag pick and roll, period. Like that's what they've been doing so far. We'll see how they build off that. We'll see what they continue to implement off that. But if it's Brandon Miller bringing it up, he's the one running the double drag action. If it's LaMelo, he's doing it. Micic, Mann, like all of those guys have gotten opportunities so far. And on the other side, all of those guys have gotten to work as screeners in that action with that double setup. Like it's often they've got Bridges, the de facto 4, or Salon. Those guys are spaced in the corner. And so the double ball screen is coming with, Nick Richards or Diabate or Gibson, one of the 5s, or Harry Giles, and then either the 2 or the 3. So, it's Mann or it's Miller or LaMelo. And I love that. It's a great way to scramble up the defense a little bit. The other thing that I've also liked, and I remember them doing this a little bit in summer league, but it's been cool to sort of study it a little bit more in preseason. You're seeing the Hornets play a lot of 5 out, right? A lot, everyone plays 5 out. Charlotte's playing a lot of 5 out too, but often in those situations, they're not like the 5 out setup is not with the center, Nick Richards. Oh, by the way, in midseason form for picking up offensive fouls while setting screens, just really, he hasn't missed a beat. But instead of having the center, in the middle of the court and, getting into some, delay 5 out action with, handoffs, all that type of stuff, the Hornets, and I've tweeted this out, some videos of this out, they're stashing a non-shooting center. So Richards or Diabate, Gibson, Giles, they're stashing them usually it's like on the left wing or in the left slot on the opposite side from the action. And they're using the sort of like negative spacing with the opposing center sagging off those guys, and they're turning those guys into screeners. And this is something that I believe I've seen other people put this out on Twitter. Last season is something that Quinn Snyder and the Hawks have done. with Clint Capella. It's something that the Boston Celtics did when they didn't have Kristaps Porzingis, a real big time A+ stretch shooting 5. And I've really liked what it's allowed them to do. They've set up some flare screens and some catch and shoot 3s for Salon off that. They've set up second side pick and rolls off of that with a quick they run a pick and roll on the right side of the court. Nothing's there. LaMelo pitches it back to the center on the left side of the floor. Then he sprints into a handoff, got downhill, and got a foul in the Miami game against that. So just like a cool little tweak that I'm sure they're probably not the only team doing this. Along with Atlanta or Boston, I'm sure other teams. It's a copycat league. Like more are doing it or will start doing it. But I've really liked that change.
It's just like utilization of your guy. That's not like you don't want him in the dunker spot because he's eating space, and you really don't want him in the corner because he's not a shooter. So utilize this, utilize what he can do here, and it's a great late shot clock, kind of desperation play because you're going to free somebody. You got to make the pass and you got to make the shot, but at least those two things can come together at a higher probability when you use them like that.
And it's not like we have many shooting bigs anyway, so it's like might as well use the guys you got.
none of the centers, that's for sure. But even they ran one against Miami late in the game where I think Salon set a ball screen on the right slot, right wing for it was either Mann or Micic. And Miami switched the action. So all of a sudden, Keyshawn Johnson, a power forward, he's out. Now he's guarding the 1. And so when Trey Mann then throws the ball to Diabate and then snaps into a quick second side action, if you've gotten that first switch,
Yep.
Now it's not the opposing point guard trying to navigate the screens, right? Like it's a 4. And some forwards are going to be able to handle that. But generally speaking, like those are not the guys that are getting skinny and fighting around screens and stuff like that if you're trying to play drop coverage. So there's some cool like matchup components you can get out of it. I'm looking forward to seeing more of it. And then just defensively, and we can sort of maybe talk about like LaMelo's individual defense more in a second. But I would just say like we've seen them do a fair amount of drop coverage so far with Richards and with Gibson. We've seen them mix things up, guarding ball screens a little bit more with Diabate. Like they switched a lot with him in a couple of these games. Or they've had him sort of like blitz or like be up at the level a little bit more aggressively. So I think he's been an interesting two-way guy so far. And I've kind of liked some of the defensive versatility with him guarding screens. And then I also really enjoyed them in both the New York matchup and the Miami matchup. We saw Coach Lee and the Hornets cross match their defensive assignments at the 4 and 5. So when they're playing a big time pick and pop, Karl Anthony Towns stretch 5 shooter, they put Miles Bridges on them. And that way they can switch those actions and then stay out of rotation, right? They did the same thing against Kevin Love in Miami. Maybe that's not, maybe with Kevin Love, you don't need to toggle the matchups too much for 52-year-old Kevin Love or whatever out there. But I thought, and then what they did with that against New York, they had the center, Richards, guard Josh Hart. And New York knows what to do with that, right? I mean, they're going to turn Josh Hart into a screener and a short roll guy, and Towns can space. So it's like they can problem solve off of that. But I thought that, and New York's going to see that. New York will see that kind of coverage a lot this season. It's not like the Hornets are splitting the atom with it, but I just thought their execution of it was good. And there was even in the New York game where they were able to, I can't remember who it was I think it was Richards and LaMelo did a really nice job, like scramble switching on the backside of the play. So like LaMelo, there's a switch, Bridges goes on to Brunson, LaMelo's in the post against Towns. And before New York can, punch it to him down the post, Richards comes in from the off Josh Hart on the right corner, and then LaMelo kicks out onto that and ends up getting a deflection when the ball swings around to the other side. So again, it's hard to see just from when you're watching on your computer screen or your TV or whatever, but I think their versatility has jumped off. Their communication so far has looked good. And I just think the energy, especially from LaMelo, defensively, I think he's never going to be a shutdown guy, but he's healthy. And I think these are just 2 preseason games. Like I think he's shown some stuff with his length on that side of the floor. So do you guys have any thoughts on what you've seen on either side of the court from them defensively? And if not, then we'll go ahead and just we can flip into LaMelo here.
Well, this is about LaMelo and not necessarily the first game, but it really jumped off at me in the second preseason game. I think maybe this is not intentional, but it seems intentional to my eye. LaMelo feeding down the court off defensive rebound opportunities and not trying to get in there and mix it up, or Nick Richards gets the rebound or whoever it might be and coming back to the ball, like releasing down the floor. Almost like we got Miles can shoot, Brandon can shoot, LaMelo can shoot. We got a lot of wings that can shoot. Get out of there if you're not in position to defensive rebound and get to the corner, get to the opposite corner, get to the ball side corner. And there was one, I think Seth Curry was the assister last night, where he pitched it. He was probably 10 feet before the halfway mark, pitched it up to LaMelo in the ball side corner. LaMelo knocks down a 3. There's no defender within 7 feet, 8 feet of him. And it's that kind of stuff with LaMelo where it's like, we know it's your instinct to come to the ball all the time, grab it, but it really actually slows down our offense, right? And that's not like rocket science. You can figure that out. But him, even if he doesn't get an open shot on that, on that sideline pass up the floor, it gets us, it compromises the defense quicker. And I really noticed that, and not just with LaMelo last night, but I think he's the most important player for Charlotte to understand that. But that really jumped off at me last night, and I was pretty giddy to watch it.
Yeah, and like for me, keeping on about LaMelo, what I've really liked about him is that just and we kind of talked about this, about just the energy around him just seems different. I think that a lot of people, whether you are only a fan of this team for LaMelo, whether you're one of those people, it's a lot has happened these last 2 years where the fan base has tried to divide themselves for whatever reason. But no matter what side you were on, everybody knew that this was LaMelo's year in terms of you are the highest paid player and we're trying to do something. It doesn't have to necessarily be playoffs, but we're trying to do something. And the way he's just carrying himself, I would say that it's like he's accepted that challenge. Now, is there a real challenge out there for him to do so? No, but it just seems as though he's carrying himself as, I know that this is my season. I know that this is my team. I know that and I think Terry actually said it last night when they interviewed him after the game. He's like, that team will go as far as LaMelo takes him when he's healthy. And I think LaMelo knows that. I think he's always known it, but this year it just seems as though he is just showing on the court. I think before it was just natural talent. It was just natural talent to where it's like, okay, that's the guy. Of course, we're following him, following his lead. It feels as though this year he's leading by example. He's communicating. You said something about like how they're communicating on defense. One thing I've noticed is that it's not a lot of, that's my guy, so I'm going to stick to him. Even if sometimes I run by this wide open person, I'm going to stick to this guy because that's my guy. No, if they get beat because of a screen or they just get lost because the guy just was able to lose them, they just go to the open person. They're not trying to chase the ball handler and say, okay, well, that's my guy. I know I got double screen, but no, it's like they just, in the person who is on the other side of that knows I'm not going to try to stick to my person who's the screener. I'm just going to pick up the ball. And we're seeing that. I'm seeing that from Tajon. I'm seeing that from LaMelo. I'm seeing it from Brand. I'm seeing it from all our key guys. And I think that's just very, very important. And I like to see that because it's something that I feel as though that should have been happening, but it's just been very much of so. And it's easy to do where it's like, okay, this is my guy, I'm gonna stick to him. But it's very easy to see more and more of these guys being able to pick that up instead of just, that's my guy and I'm worried about him scoring. But it's like, no, there's 4 other players on the court. If they're open, guard them. Because I know times last year we would see them run right by the open person just because their guy has the ball. And it's like, why are you not picking up this guy? So I really like seeing that.
Yeah, the Hornets defense last year was man, it was painful for me to watch. I can't imagine what Steve Clifford was seeing his life fashion for him probably every other night, especially at the back end of the season.
I heard so much for him. I mean, I could just imagine how much that was hurting Steve Clifford inside. Every night, like I couldn't watch because it just hurt me so much for Steve Clifford.
He was able to coach him up, 2 seasons ago with Mark Williams and JT Thor playing well, Dennis Smith Jr., down the stretch, but that was not to be had last season, that's for sure. Richie Randall, Everett, the producer, he's mentioning in our little private chat with the recording, the peel switches. You could even see early in the game last night. So something Steve Jones tweeted this clip out on Twitter, where LaMelo was like probably 1 pass away guarding someone on like the right, I guess the left wing. There was the ball screen on the right wing. Guard turned the corner, got downhill a little bit. LaMelo slid over and switched and got in front of them. Just seeing that, like that kind of execution on the fly. And man, like when he's active with his length and he's such a fast processor, he can do some cool stuff. There was another play in that Miami game. The Heat had the ball on a baseline out of bounds play. They ran flex action. Jimmy Butler screens for someone in the corner. LaMelo switches to Butler, or I guess maybe Butler came off the flex screen. Either way, LaMelo switches on to Jimmy Butler, gets a really nice deflection when they try to like force the ball into Butler on like an ISO on the right wing. And then he actually guards one-on-one. Butler settles for a long contested 2, nice contest by LaMelo. LaMelo gets the rebound, hit ahead pass, 2.5 seconds later, Brandon Miller layup. And it was just an awesome sequence by LaMelo. And he's never going to be a shutdown guy on that end, but with his length and with his just like processing speed, it's like he can do stuff, and it's like, and not the first 2 seasons of LaMelo where he was, super reckless and gambling. And like, I'm sure he's going to do plenty of that this year too. But if you get him to just like cut down on 15% of the clutter, Same way. You want him to take 15%. You cut out 15% of the dumb shots that he takes. And
I
like,
would say, like, sorry, keep going.
no, you got it. Jump in.
Yeah, I would say, like, if I were coaching, be like, within 12 seconds of the shot clock, if we're under 12, like, I'm just asking for like 6 or 7 really hard seconds of defense, because just what you said, your length is going to bother whatever the might be decision of this offensive player might be, whether it's a shot or a pass. Like, you're going to create more opportunities for us to play fast just by those. It's really not much. 6 seconds of hard defense, like that. We don't need you to be elite. We just need you to bring energy in a certain part of the game, right? Or a certain part of the possession, rather.
And when he's willing to do that, to sort of like guard up, and do that on 2s and 3s and stuff like that, it's interesting because it means he's probably having to guard fewer ball screens, which I think is good. And it also does open the door for Charlotte to like get a little bit more playmaking juice offensively and get to more of those lineups with LaMelo as the de facto 2 and Brandon as the 3, and Man or Misic or Curry or whomever. It gives them a little bit more like lineup optionality when he's willing to sort of like handle that sort of stuff. But I think he's done a nice job like fighting over. Like, he blew up a dribbled handoff for Drew Smith in the Miami game. So I don't know. I've just seen like good compete from him so far on that end. He also got beat. I think it was the Miami game too. One of the reserves for Miami kind of beat him off the dribble late in the possession. And I mean, LaMelo could have done the Olay defense and just let him go straight in for a layup. But instead he used his hands, slapped down, and knocked the ball off the driving guard out of bounds for a turnover. So, like what I've seen so far from him on both ends of the court, he's shot the 3 ball really well so far. I will say he's taken 29 field goals in 2 games. 22 of them have been 3s. So he's going to do LaMelo things, and like he's going to get the shots up there. But plenty of those have been, off the catch or in transition. They're not like, wild, step back type things. Turnovers are down, which is something that I think is always worth pointing out, that like he usually does do a pretty good job taking care of the ball. Like, I think there's actually a pretty big misconception that like he's super wild and he throws the ball all over the yard. And like, I mean, he definitely takes some chances for sure. But I mean, he hovers like right at 15% turnover rate for his career. You know what I mean? Like, his inefficiencies on offense come with like shot selection and the fact that like he's not an amazing rim finisher, So, and then he's having to take a lot of like contested 2s in the mid range or floaters and that type of stuff. But like overall, I think he's looked great so far. He's such a talent. It's very fun to see him out there. Just got to stay healthy. I mean, like I'm not even sure like what else there is to even like say with him. It's just like he's an unbelievable talent. He's super fun. He's young. He's getting better. He just got to play 70 games this year or something. Like you just got to have it. You need to have it. So
and we saw this a few years ago, and I just think it's prime to take off this season. But especially late shot clock too. As many LaMelo as ball handler, Miles Bridges as screener situations we can get into with Miles short rolling, like we're gonna get shots. We're just gonna get shots. Like that is a extremely hard combination, even for elite defenses to deal with, because LaMelo he can just jump pass right over your head.
Yep.
Bridges at the free throw line, or he's south of that, and he's a good enough passer to make stuff happen. Like, that is a play that I really want to see Lee exploit. Early in the game, late in the game, late shot clock, early shot clock. I just think it's a pretty dynamic mixture for this offense.
Yeah. In your see, they're running either designed, early in the offense, or sort of like, late offense, late clock progression. They're running those like angled step up screens with Bridges and LaMelo. They're in the left, on the right or left, winger slot. The center's on the opposite one. That's where they're getting to some of these like five slot, type offensive possessions. And it's getting them good offense. And it helps obviously if you've got guys like Brandon Miller or whomever that are able to also like space the floor around that and be dangerous second side shooters, that type of stuff. So there's a good mix so far. Any other thoughts on Any other thoughts on LaMelo, or should we go ahead and move on to the rookie here?
Yeah, we can go ahead and move on.
All right, here we go. Tijon Salon. It's been very fun watching him so far in these first couple of games. He has not been shy. He's getting shots up. He's playing hard. You knew he's going to bring the energy, play hard. I think defensively, been a bit of a mixed bag so far. We can get into that maybe a little bit more. But Darian, I'll start with you. Thoughts on Salon so far through these first 2 preseason games, and just maybe, do you think we're seeing genuine growth from Summer League 3 months ago, or is this him, in a small sample shooting pretty well from deep?
I think we're seeing it's a little bit of both, but I will say I think we're seeing some growth from him. I think he just looks more comfortable. And while that may not be necessarily a skill set, I think that it has enhanced some things that he has, I wouldn't say is known for doing well in the past, but at one point, if you, and I always say this, that you could do anything to numbers to make them say what you want them to say. But at one point, if you looked at his shooting numbers and you split it a certain way, he wasn't that bad of a 3-point shooter, at least as it seemed that he was in Summer League. So it doesn't surprise me, but it does. I guess I will say it does surprise me because how efficient he's been, but it doesn't surprise me that he's just willing to take them. But it also surprises me how comfortable he just seems on the floor. He makes a mistake. I know last night, I think he had a turnover and he just ran back down the floor and then just got back in front of the ball handler pretty quickly. And he didn't kind of let that bother him. He came right back down the floor the following possession, and tried to make something happen on offense. He's not shy. And I feel as though you would have, and I honestly think it could be a language barrier thing that he just seems shy. But when he's in it, he's in it. He's trying to hype up the crowd. He's throwing the threes up. He's a fun player to watch. And I feel like every time he gets the ball, he does something a little different. It could be a small movement. It could, I remember the one that's circulating now on Twitter is the shoulder push off of, I can't remember who it was, in the corner. And he puts up the 3 and makes it last night from the Heat game. That's something we didn't really see him do in Summer League. It seemed like in Summer League he's just I'm just trying to get my legs underneath me, but now we're just seeing him do just more and more. He's just feeling more and more comfortable. And it has a lot of people saying that he deserves rotation minutes. We could talk about that because I know that some of that is going to come to what you said. Like you said, we're going to talk about his defense a little bit. But naturally, I think his defense is pretty – it's as good as you can expect it right now. He definitely knows how to use his size, and that's kind of what is bothering a lot of ball handlers. Once I think he learns angles a little better, it's gonna, he's gonna become an even better defender. But I think he knows he's familiar with his size, and I think we talk about that a lot. Well, mainly, of course, bigger players is that you have all this size, but you don't know how to use it. I think he knows how to use it. I think once we get the fundamentals down, I think that's really where it's going to take off, and I could really see him being someone that gets a lot of minutes just strictly because he can play defense. But then he does open up for you on offense. Right now, he's just kind of a catch and shoot kind of guy. Or he's not afraid to take it to the rim either. But the catch and shoot has been working, and he will put it up in a hurry. He is not shy about it at all. And so I like that. It feels as though he just fits right in with the team because I feel as though the team is going to feed off that energy. And the funniest part about it to me is just for him, I think he's just I'm just playing basketball. But there's so much energy around him in the way he plays. It feels as though, especially considering who he's been playing with, it's not like he has so many minutes with LaMelo or so many minutes with Brandon. But it feels as though that energy is infectious to those other guys. So I can't imagine what it's going to be like when he's getting real minutes in a real NBA game. I think it's exciting. He has a lot to work on for sure, but I would say I am surprised about how comfortable he's gotten so fast because it's not like he played that many Summer League games, and it's not like, he was showing it, how comfortable he was game 1 of the preseason. So I can only imagine what it's going to be like, even if he gets, 20 games in Greensboro or 10 games in Greensboro. I can't wait to see what that looks like.
Yeah, you said it very well, Darian. I'm very excited. I'm kind of wondering, is this Rashard Lewis's child? That's what he looks like so far.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna catch and shoot at 6'10" and just shoot over you. be damned you, the defender in front of me.
He
You can't do
doesn't
anything.
care.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the defense is obviously. I mean, he's a baby deer right now, right? Like he doesn't know his left foot from his right foot on that end. But look, the early returns are great. He's so young. I think this is a fantastic prospect for the Hornets. I wasn't in love with the pick, for lack of better terms, when they made it, but I got to be honest. I'm impressed, especially if he can provide some kind of switchability and rim protection on the other end. I mean, that's really the key that unlocks everything, because I think we can already see he's going to be a floor spacer regardless of what else he can really do on the offensive end. So, yeah. So, I hope he gets some minutes this year. He will. He'll get minutes, because of injuries, if nothing else. I don't think you slot him in, day one as a rotation guy, but injuries will come. He'll get in there. He'll have really, really bad moments. He'll have some bright moments. But again, like, how old is this kid?
He just turned 19 like 2
He's
months
19
ago.
He's 19
just turned
years old.
19.
Like, it's going to be a roller coaster. But there's, sometimes you only need with players, prospects this young, you need a very little sample to see. Okay, all right, we're working with something here. And think about this: 6 years from now, this guy's gonna be 25 years old. Okay, I think we're working with something here. What the Hornets got to get right is not getting impatient and being like, "Yeah, we're not going to renew his contract."
Yeah. But and another cool thing is he loves basketball. Like that's all. The few words you can get out of him, he's just like, "Yeah, I just like playing like I just like working. I just like playing basketball." So that at 18, 19, like you said, in 6 years, I just feel confident in the rest. He loves the game.
I totally agree, Darren. And you made a great point about his energy. I mean, he's a kid that you can tell he's still trying to like come into himself, his own body, all this. But he has a personality, right? Like he has energy. He has something that's going to be positive in terms of who he is as a person, aside from all the basketball stuff too, which I think that's a great point as well.
Yeah, there's just such a ready-made archetype for him, right? It's like floor spacing for that can switch around, guard different positions, and gives you some secondary rim protection. Boom, right? And like if you get that, you have a guy that's in rotations and probably starting, for years from now. Like, again, I've said this a few times on the pod, we're nowhere close to this, but like there is a future where like he's the floor spacing four, that plays with LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller, that he's starting next to those guys, whatever the future for the forward room looks like, after Miles Bridges, right? That it would be his sort of position to own. I've really been impressed with like the catch and shoot stuff so far, not just because it's something, some of it has been him, just purely spaced to the corner, and just shooting, open off the catch. But man, they're running some actions and stuff for him too, right? Like they're running down screens. He's curling, pin downs, pin downs out of the corner. They're running him off. They run him off. They run the same little play in both games to get him coming off of a flare screen after a timeout for a three from the wing. He hit that one deep three in the Miami game in transition where LaMelo was like, "Here you go, man. Why don't you shoot it?" And then he took a three from like basically LaMelo range, like way out there.
The one he took, and maybe one of you guys can tell me, I don't know who the defender was, but last night against Miami, the one he caught in the corner, it might have been late shot clock, and he kind of fumbled the catch, and then he looks at the defender, and the defender's right in his hip, and he just kind of like.
I think it may have been Pele Larson. I think it was either him or maybe it was him or Keisha Johnson.
But what that told me was like, this kid, like, there's not a lot of rookies in general, whether you're 20, 21, 22, this kid's 19. That's just like, all right, I'm just going to shoot over you.
Yeah.
You just don't see that a lot.
With the release, the ability, the fragments of him shooting off of movement, the range on some of those catch and shoot looks, is huge. And he's one of those guys. It's like if he ends up in the mid 30s, with volume, that's like boom, that's perfect. You're not asking this guy to be Paul George, you know what I mean? It's like, can you take a half dozen threes per game and shoot 36% on them, because that's going to allow the team to use you as a screener. in pick and pops and ghost screen situations. They can run plays for you coming off of screens. It's going to space the floor when you're outside of the action. And it's going to allow you to get into catch and go situations. And the catch and goes are like a little bit of a, it's a little bit of a mixed bag right now. The handle is loose, so guys can reach their hands in and knock it out. But he had a really nice, again, I'm blanking on which game it was. He had a nice like pump and go along the right baseline where he kicked it out to like the left wing. There was an extra pass along the perimeter and someone hit a three, and you got, it was a hockey assist for him. So, and he showed, if you watched him play for Colette, like he showed some catch and go game there too. He showed some ability to come off of movement. Often when they were running like Spain pick and roll, he'd set the back screen on that action and then pop out. This to me is more advanced than that. I mean, this is them running, actions for him. I love the little like curl, coming off the pin down, one dribble curl, mid-range long two that he hit. I think it was the only non-3 he hit against Miami. And his box score from that game was great. 24 minutes, 4 of 7 from deep, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, a steal. The Hornets were plus 13 in 24 minutes with him on the floor. He also had a really nice possession, and he did not get credited for the block. Second half of that game, he tracked back in transition, and again, really nice contest at the rim. A possession that you might expect a lot of 6'9" rookie, 19-year-old defenders to try to like swipe and go all out for a block. 2 hands up, perfect verticality, contest, got the miss at the rim. Miami's playing their, some guys that aren't going to make the roster in those minutes, but like I thought he looked good in like moments of team defense. He got a steal on the backside of the pick and roll off of a bad pass. The one other thing I would say for him too defensively, I think this is gonna be the area where like he probably needs the most growth, and I think when it happens, it's gonna really be noticeable because of it. But just him like guarding in space, he's so stiff and upright. Like that's where guys can just blow by him right now if they've got like any juice with the ball. So he's not ready in terms of that, but like get this guy in some yoga classes, get him stronger. Like it's good. That stuff. You can't like perfect lateral speed and all those types of things, but you can definitely improve it. And I think some of it's just going to be by turning him into a stronger, more nimble athlete. You're just going to unlock the length and the athleticism a little bit more. So have been very impressed with him so far. Look, it's probably helped that he has shot well on these threes. He's 7 of 12 on threes. Look, if he, like he did in summer league, if he's, 2 of 12 or whatever, maybe we're not, the vibes are, a little bit, not quite as like rosy as they are now, but, the upside's interesting. Like I said, there's a ready-made archetype for him. There's a role for him if he down the line, if he's able to progress into it. I don't see him playing that much on this year's team unless he really just is like a 40% three-point shooter, because they got Bridges and Grant Williams, and those guys are going to play a lot of minutes at the 4. Grant's obviously going to play some 5 too, but it's hard to see like reliable minutes for him. But look, if the Hornets end up being sellers at the deadline, if and I could see, a guy like Grant Williams, I could see someone in the front court being, Richards or Grant Williams, being moved or whatever, then that would open the door for more playing time for him, the back third of the season. But in the meantime, it is quite fun to see him, dare I say, thriving in the role that he's carved out. All right. Any other thoughts on Salon before we close out?
Just one, BG. You're talking about his defense. Watching last night, I did have like a moment of panic where I was like, oh my gosh, his gate is Obi Toppin.
Yeah.
Like, oh, what am I gonna do? Like he literally can't flip his hips. But then I remembered he was 19 years old or he was super young, and Obi Toppin I think was 22 when he was drafted.
Yep.
So we got plenty of time to your yoga point, but that is certain. But then you watch one other note to that, seriously, is his footwork on the offensive end when he catches the ball. And he gets into his shooting gate, his footwork is excellent. It's excellent. It's 1-2, it's pop. It's quick. And, I think that kind of stuff, just learning the game, can translate to the defensive end. You can have stiff hips, but have good feet. and still be able to guard. And I think that's kind of the baseline of where he has to start from in terms of being an on-ball defender, or just really being able to move side to side in general. But yeah, he's so young. It's not a point of panic now, but I did have a moment last night where I was like, oh, am I watching Obi Toppin Dayton highlights right now?
What's funny is I actually remember I could get checked on this, but I'm pretty sure I remember when back in 2020 when we did our scouting pod on Obi Toppin, we recommended yoga lessons for him as well. I'm like
the worst defenders I've ever seen on film ever.
It's
above the size of 6
weird. Yeah, so weird. So weird. But yeah, in a regulator in the chat, he mentions a question for us. He says, can Miles move to the 3 to make room for TJ, bring Josh off the bench? I mean, yeah, I think it's possible. I wouldn't. Again, I think there's a lot of guys in the guard room. So if you're putting Bridges at the 3, Brandon's being moved to the 2, it's like you can't do it. Brandon's going to give you some playmaking. It can give you some playmaking and shooting. So I also thought Brandon's had a tough game shooting against Miami, but I thought played well against New York. We didn't really touch on him much. I think it's a possibility. I just don't see that being. I think there would have to be some roster attrition one way or the other to like really open up that possibility. But who knows? I mean, again, if Salon were to like actually shoot like this, it's a different story. Then all of a sudden you're gonna have to find ways to like move pieces around and get him in the lineup. But if if the 3-point shooting comes back to earth or whatever, or levels out, then I still think he's going to be a guy that spends most of his time in Greensboro. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? I mean, like that's turning into that has a chance to be a good pipeline for the Hornets. And my guess is he'll get to play with Nick Smith and KJ Simpson. By the way, like we didn't really talk much about KJ Simpson. Thought he looked okay at times. Thought he had a couple of nice, was able to beat guys with his dribble without a ball screen. So, and he had a nice defensive possession against, I think it was Stevens for Miami, no. He locked up Josh Christopher off a pick and roll switch and got a steal and then drew a foul. So I thought KJ Simpson's shown some things too. So, anything else? Any other things you guys want to talk about before we go ahead and wrap up this preseason pod?
I got 2 things. So one, I liked your point about him going to Greensboro. I think Greensboro is going to be used a little differently than it has been in years past.
That's a safe bet, dude. That's a
real. It just feels like the last few years.
What do you mean, Darian? Like that I can't go there and score 50 points on a Thursday night?
Look, it's gonna be Dwayne Bacon Memorial Night where one contestant from the crowd is selected.
Dwayne Bacon bobblehead night or something.
You're gonna take 45 shots in a Swarm game.
It just feels like the Swarm in the past. They put you there, but then they don't do anything with it. They just let you do whatever. We've had James Bouknight have great nights. We have Kai Jones have great nights. We had Mark Williams have hitting like half court threes. Like all kinds of stuff has happened in Greensboro. And now I'm not saying I want Mark Williams attempting half court threes at the Hornets, but it just seems as though you let those guys do that, and you're like, all right, we're going to sit you for we're going to call you back up, sit you for 20 games, and let somebody else just play those minutes in Greensboro after you just was 11 for 11 from the field. And now, granted, those 2 guys may not be the best example because they're not on the team anymore. We can even use Bryce McGowan's in this situation, Leaky Black to a small extent, but it's just like they just put guys there and then don't try to even. Because last 2 years were the time to try things out. Now it's a little more like we actually have a somewhat of a competent roster. So I feel as though, Salon being in Greensboro is just going to be a lot different. That's what I'm hoping for, but that's what it seems like. I know a lot of people hear that and like, oh, your number 6 pick is going to Greensboro. I think Greensboro is going to just be completely different than it has been in years past. And one more thing is I couldn't let the podcast go by without talking about Trey Mann.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot to say, but I'll just say he just seems very like he didn't seem as though he was comfortable last season. Maybe on the court, but just like in general, he was just trying to adjust to just being traded. And I feel as though now he's just kind of embraced it. I think last year it was more of I think he felt a type of way about being traded, which understandably so. And he's also a guy for OKC that had big. I mean, while the games may not have mattered, but he had some big games in OKC. So I think he felt a way about being traded and kind of just took that into the offseason. And I think he's like, he just seems fully bought in. He seems fully locked in. Like there was a time like he was just sitting there and they zoomed in on him when he was just sitting at the free throw. And it just like, if you looked at him, you just couldn't see anything. Like he was just so just thinking about the game. I don't know. It was just cool to see. And then his play has, of course, reflected that on both ends of the ball. I think he's been good on ball defending. I think he's been pretty good. Well, we all know he was pretty good at playing in passing lanes, but he's continuously doing that. I think he's taken a lot of things that we saw him do a little bit last year and carrying that over to this year, but to a higher extent. So I really like what I see from Tre Mann. I know there's been I say arguments, but there's been back and forth. Is he going to be the backup point guard? Is he going to be the shooting guard? He showed that he could do. It doesn't matter. Yeah. It doesn't matter. He's going to succeed either way. It's all going to be about kind of who's in front of him. Is Misha's healthy? Is LaMelo healthy? Is Brandon healthy? That's the only thing that's going to decide whether or not he plays one position over the other. But overall, his skill set is fit perfectly for both. He's shown that I can be the lead ball handler when I need to. With certain guys on the floor, and I can be, the secondary ball handler if I need to, and I can play off ball. It doesn't matter. So I think that he's just going to be a very, very important piece for this team because it seems like he can do it all. Now, he's not, when you say someone can do it all, you think all-star level talent, but he's a do-it-all for what we need. I think that he just does a lot of things well that's going to help support this team, and it's something that we haven't had in a while. It's either we've had someone that can score, it couldn't play defense, or we had the Dennis Smith Jr., who was known the NBA stats will prove it. He was one of the best perimeter defenders during his time here, but couldn't give you much on offense. So Tre Mann's just a little bit of best of both worlds, and I think that's going to be great for us.
Quickly on Tre Mann, I know we got to get out of here, but yeah, color me at this point. Optimistically famine. He's one of these guys that I just think he's at least a lot of feast of famine. His skill set is dynamic, as you touched on, Darian, and I think he can play the one. I think he can play the two. I think he's kind of, if you want to find his perfect role, it's some kind of microwave scorer, keep the ball up on the defensive end, just play your tail off on every possession kind of guy. But boy, he loves to pound it. And it just every time I watch him, and when he makes a good play, I'm like, it's almost like, all right, exhale. Like, that was good. Let's celebrate. And then when things don't go right, I'm like, well, of course they didn't go right. So he's one of these guys where I think this is one of Charles Lee's toughest rotational fits. What is the best? Mm-hmm. And not really where does he play? He's in the rotation, obviously, right? Mm-hmm. That's not a question. But who is he best to play with?
Yeah,
I guess is the bigger thing. And because he is dynamic, but he doesn't give it up very often. Yeah. And so he needs to play with certain people. And, it's just, I don't know. I just, when I watch basketball guys that do that kind of stuff, it doesn't help me sleep very well. So we'll see what happens with Tre Mann, but I'm a big fan.
He had some possession in the Miami game. He pounded the ball a bunch, and even Eric Collins was like, "Ooh, a lot of dribbles from Mann on this possession." It's like, yeah, he is. I mean, Mann is so, to me, I very much enjoy watching him play, but he is quite vexing. I can't tell if he was sort of born 10 years too early or 10 years too late. He's got so much skill, and his ability to create space is a plus, and he doesn't need a ball screen to get downhill or to create his own shot, and there aren't that many guys on planet Earth that can do that at an NBA level. But it's all the other stuff he does offensively almost isn't quite high enough to sort of to make him scalable. So yeah, I do think you need to find I do think the optimal role for him is sort of microwave guy off the bench, but he's not like a Lou Williams, I'm going to get up 15 shots. He kind of wants to pass, he does sort of, he wants to dribble a lot, but he wants to run an empty side pick and roll and look to pass off of it too, so I don't know. I'm not sure if it's sort of like there is like a reserve playmaking role for him.
I like him with Miller a lot, for the record.
Yeah. Yep.
I like
Yeah,
playing
yeah.
with Brandon Miller more than any other guy that's a key guy for Charlotte.
Those
Because I
guys.
think Miller makes quick decisions off the catch, and man needs to play with a guy like that. Like, yeah.
Also, like the last season, the Trey Man, Nick Richards or Grant Williams empty corner pick and roll with Brandon Miller spotting up in the weak side slot or wing or corner or whatever. That was a cash play for the Hornets too. Because that's how's the defense rotating around this? If someone's peeling in at the showing help at the nail or at the elbow or whatever, that's a boom, kick it to Brandon and let him get up a three or whatever. So those guys, there's some stuff that they work off one another, and I'm sure we're going to see them in some hybrid lineups together. Yeah. Whether Man's playing with 3 or 4 of the starters, or Miller's the lone starter with a bench group on the floor or whatever. Like, you're definitely going to see those guys, and like, I mean, we're not going to get into this at this point. We've talked about it plenty too. Brandon's ability to play without the ball is just like special. It just is. And watching him in the preseason again, and then watching the last couple of months in the offseason, like going back up and watching some film from his rookie season, underrated screen setter, underrated, slip screen, ghost screen guy. And he just moves so well without the basketball. It is, it's actually quite remarkable. And so, yeah, that's a perfect guy to put around, a guy like Man, right? Because
I'm so happy he's like cold out of the gates the preseason too. Everybody's like, what's going on with Brandon? It's like, oh yeah, you guys, yeah, he's fine.
He's fine.
Don't worry.
The shot is the last thing I'm worried about.
Yeah. There's a pretty good sample at this point that he can shoot it. So, all right, I'm good. I'm glad we got some man talking, Trey Man talking there at the end. Last thing I would say, fingers crossed we see Mark Williams, sometime soon. I'm not sure if he's out for all of preseason or not, but obviously dealing with a foot injury. Not great to see. Would love to see him on the court sooner rather than later. So, all right. Spencer, Darian, Richie, who's been producing, thank you so much for joining me today to talk some Hornets hoops, and for all those who listened live, who have been commenting along, or are going to hopefully listen to this when it hits their podcast feed. Look, I don't know how this thing's going to go this season, but we're gonna at least at this point, we're going to try to find maybe a routine or a rhythm to get some pods out throughout the season. Please continue to listen, rate, review. And would also just give a big thanks to Richie Randall, who's been producing behind the scenes. I sort of said my feelings about everything on Twitter, but love the guy. And honestly, like, Darian, you're more of you're newer to the pod, but Spencer, Richie, getting to host this show with y'all over the years has been like really one of the absolute highlights of getting to watch hoops and talk about it. So feel very generous, I feel have a lot of gratitude and feel very fortunate to still be doing this as the calendar is, slowly inching towards 2025. It's crazy. So,
yeah, BG, real quick before you get out of here, I would just like to ask the audience of this. You guys have, hopefully a lot of you listening have listened to Buzzbeat for a while. If you're new, thank you so much for listening. We are in a point of transition. I think Richie made that very clear, and BG just touched on it. We're not sure what comes next, but give us feedback. Let us know what you want. If it's once a month, if it's once a week, if you like what we've given you in the past, please let us know, because we're trying to figure this out. And we still have a team of guys that really like doing this, but life happens, right? And responsibilities happen. And so we're trying to figure this out as we go, and the season's about to start, so that kind of ups the pressure, right? But I would just ask that people please let us know, give us feedback, and Buzzbeat's not going. It will survive one way or another. I think I can at least guarantee that. But I would ask for some feedback on what do you guys think the best way to move forward is. So that's it, BG. Thanks, man.
No, that's well said. We've all said this before, but the community around the show is really what makes this special. So yeah, the more feedback, that we get, the better that we appreciate that. And with that, who knows when we'll be back on? Maybe we'll try to get one, hopefully get one more out before the season actually starts. The Hornets are in action on Thursday. I believe they're playing the Memphis Grizzlies, who seem to be now like a frisky pick to finish. Maybe even second in the Western Conference now that Minnesota has moved a few pieces around. We'll see, but that should be a fun game to keep an eye on. So